Thank you today for coming to our Converting Presentations to Papers, a basic guide, which hopefully will be very helpful. As we move through, we're going to cover a number of things today. We're going to look at the differences between a presentation and an academic paper, some housekeeping things that you should set up, a little bit about the manuscript review process, managing the writing process, and if we have time at the end, possibly look at some live demos of some of the resources we talk about today. So the good news is that many of you probably already have the basics of a paper embedded in a presentation. The message you want to emphasize in your presentation informs the intent of the paper to your anticipated audience. The sequence of information you created for the presentation often mirrors the information needed by your reader for your manuscript. The main topics of the presentation often provide or inform the content areas of the paper, and the specifics, such as tables, charts, and references, are often essential elements of a paper. So the first step is to determine exactly how much new material is needed based upon what you presented at the conference and also what is needed for the manuscript. Obviously, the rhetorical devices used in presentations don't immediately translate to papers. How we talk, how we converse with the audience at a conference is not necessarily how we write an academic paper. Written communication tends to emphasize coherence, cohesion, and consistency. And coherence means that the text makes sense. Cohesion is how the text links together. And consistency is the use of certain criteria across the paper to ensure it is cohesive and coherent. Things such as tense consistency, present versus past voice, formality, third versus first person voices, and semantic cues are all examples of consistency. The tenor of a presentation also changes, as in the amount of information you present to the audience, such as the number of definitions or explanations provided, or the use of jargon. We all have our academic language that we like to use. Graphics also change. We have no cartoons or dancing mice, and the visual display of numerical or textual data is different. Further, you may be limited in the number of graphics you can use in the actual manuscript, with the remainders placed into supplemental material attachments. The review of the literature may be non-existent in the presentation, with the assumption that the attendees share a similar disciplinary background and a shared foundational knowledge of the field. In a manuscript, there is no such assumption. You have a naive reader to the expert reader who could be reading that particular journal. Hence, references are more extensive and document facts, quotes, provide access to background information. And while the structure of the PowerPoint presentation may not mirror that of an academic paper, all is not lost because one can morph into the other. So let's start with the structure of the academic paper. Things to think about in the abstract. Can your conference abstract be converted to meet the requirements of an academic manuscript abstract? Is there a specific format required for the manuscript abstract? Is it an informative abstract? Is it a structured abstract? A journal may recommend a specific abstract type and guidelines for use in the journal. For example, if you're doing evidence syntheses, your abstract you'll submit to a journal should follow the PRISMA A or abstract guidelines. The introduction, a well-written introduction prepares the reader for the information that follows. It provides context for the reader and provides enough information to understand and appreciate the methods, the findings, the implications following. And with that in mind, what elements can you use in the presentation to build the introduction? Does the introductory section from the presentation give background information, the point of the research? What question or questions were addressed? If not, those questions go in your list of things to do and in the paper outline. For the review of the literature section, how does your paper fit into the current state of knowledge or best practice in the field? Who has done or is doing similar work? How do they compare? What new knowledge are you describing in your paper? Is your methods section transparent? Does it establish the rationale for your investigation and fully describe the methods you used to address your research question or questions? Does it paint an adequate picture for your audience of the setting and the population? And this holds true for both qualitative and quantitative reporting of research results. The results section is a story about your findings. It should be a logical and concise narrative that makes sense to the reader and is consistent with the accepted guidelines for the reporting of the data. It starts with the first result and works its way through the successive results. The results section is central to supporting your conclusions and the implications of your research. Looking at discussion and conclusions, the discussion should lead to the conclusion. The conclusion should summarize the significant results, and any questions or further examination should be discussed or introduced into that section as well. References should be correct per the citation style requested by the journal. They should be fully described and not shortcutted. And then there'll be recommendations, graphs, and charts to be used, which should, again, either provide a fuller information about the results of the study or create correlations or associations between important concepts. There are a number of activities that you need to get accomplished to make the process easier. This is not an all-inclusive list, but it will get you started. So the first thing you'll want to do is to establish your publication name. So we can see in the next slide, we're talking about an ORC ID. That is a unique alphanumeric string that's attached to you. It maps the current name you are publishing under with any other variant form of your name. For example, if you have a first name and a middle name and you use your middle name, not your first name, or if you have changed your surnames over time. An ORC ID maps not only the first and last name to you, but if you change your name across your academic career, the ORC ID maps all that together for you. An ORC ID is a requirement for manuscript submission on publisher submission platforms. It's also a requirement for any federally funded research you may be applying for, as in your NIH BioSketch, because the federal government wants to map your published papers that are funded by their grants to you to show that your material is publicly accessible. It only takes a few minutes to set one up. And when you set up your ORC ID, you can link it to other author ID systems, such as those found in Web of Science or Scopus. That's an important element of increasing your visibility as a published researcher and can assist you during the promotion tenure process. But that's a topic from another workshop. You also want to spend some time identifying scholarly journals. Ideally, you should identify 3 that you are interested in publishing in. Identifying journals can be tricky. You want to accept journals that are reputable, peer-reviewed, preferably ranked, and relevant to your research. And more importantly, you want to avoid those predatory journals that do not follow a standard peer review process or do not adhere to ethical publishing practices, lack transparency regarding their operational processes, and fail to provide accurate information about article processing charges if they charge for open access. There are a number of tools available through the USF libraries to understand how journals are ranked, reviewed, and how they work. Cabell's directories provide 2 lists, the Journal Analytics and Predatory Reports, which are based upon very strict criteria. The Journalytics section provides basic published information, such as frequency of publication and acceptance rates, length of time it takes to review a manuscript submission, and length of time to publication. 2 of our academic databases, the Journal Citation Reports and Scopus, also provide lists of journals divided into subject classes based upon disciplines and subdisciplines. Each journal is given an impact factor and a quartile rank. Do you rank in the top quartile of the journals that are published in that category, etc.? Predatory reports provide information about missing content from publishers. The Directory of Open Access Journals also uses strict criteria to determine reputable open access journals and maintains a list of reputable and questionable open access journals. So if you're looking at open access, Cabell's and the DOAJ are 2 essential sources you need to be looking at. If you have questions on how to use any of these resources, please set up an appointment with one of the USF Health librarians or attend one of our workshops on journal evaluation. You also want to spend some time reviewing reporting guidelines, primarily because study design is a critical component of research, and reporting the methods accurately in an academic paper can be difficult. A reporting guideline is a simple, structured tool to use while writing manuscripts. It provides a minimum list of information needed to ensure that your study can be understood by a reader, replicated by a researcher, possibly used by a clinician to make a clinical decision, or to be included in a systematic or scoping review. Many publishers are requiring the use of specific reporting guidelines to ensure transparency as well as comparability across multiple studies using that specific study design. So if I'm looking at randomized controlled trials, I will be using the consult guidelines. And everything it says to report in methods, I'm going to report, primarily because it's transparent. It ensures comparability across other RCTs, and the reviewer knows exactly how you got the results that you report. More importantly, the reporting guideline also has undergone itself a very strict review process that's documented and provides the rationale for that guideline. As you can see on the slide next to the list of names of study design types, we also have extensions. Extensions are simply adding new elements to an existing guideline to accommodate for specific reportable elements for a practice, an intervention, or a new methodology. For example, Consort has 33 extensions, which include reporting trial protocols and completed trials modified due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and as well as randomized trials that use an adaptive design. So looking at the extensions may help you determine, based upon your study design, are there unique elements that should be reported as well. Using a formal grammar, style checker, or style sheet is wonderful because it's difficult enough to create a coherent, cohesive, and consistent manuscript as a solo author And it's even more difficult when you're a member of a group. Different voices, different writing styles, different grammatical perceptions, etc. So setting up a manuscript template that addresses the font preference, headings and subheadings, how pages are enumerated, etc., based upon the manuscript reporting guidelines for the journal to which you are submitting, can save you a lot of time and effort. If there's a specific section that particular journal requires, such as implications for behavioral health, then you make sure in your template has a placeholder and that section is then addressed. It's very sad when you're a reviewer for a manuscript and there are sections that are required to be in the manuscript that don't show up. And then that's what you address with the author. In addition to the style sheet, you can also take advantage of the grammar and style checker options that come in Word. Not only can you ensure that the grammar and style checker has you speaking in the third person only, the checker can also address consistency in verb tense, commas and other punctuation, and all those lovely grammar rules we learned back in the day with our Strunk and White, such as elementary rules of usage, principles of composition, matters of form, commonly misused words and expressions, and also a reminder of an approach to style as well. We're also going to recommend that you use a citation management program. If you don't have one set up, using a citation management program is going to be really, really critical. They help you standardize the citation format. So if I'm doing APA, here are all of my elements that need to be put in. They standardize as I go across. I can store my citations and my PDFs. I can download my searches, everything into my citation management program. I can start while you write. All important things to consider. And if Journal 1 is using APA and Journal 2, I submit it to because Journal 1 said thank you but no, is using AMA, I can just flip a switch in my citation management program and it will automatically convert my citation style from APA to AMA, which makes your life much easier. Moving on to looking at the editorial process, there will always be some sort of review process. And peer review has been going on since the 1700s. And we have the Royal Society of Edinburgh and the Royal Society of London to thank for that. It's considered essential, an integral part of consensus building. Blind, anonymous peer review attempts to improve the quality of reviews by removing bias. Having people who don't know you read your paper blindly removes the temptation to be kind to the author. So upon submission, if you're new to this process, editor usually assigns 2 to 3 external reviewers. The background of the authors are generally matched with the background of the reviewers. The editor takes care of that. After the reviews, the editor summarizes the comments and makes a decision on whether to accept, reject, or ask for revisions. It's important to keep in mind that when you submit your manuscript, that many nationally known, prestigious, and the more prestigious the journal, the higher the rejection rate will be. And the rejection rate may run from 80 to 90% of all submitted manuscripts are rejected. So spending some time looking at Cabell's to get a sense of the acceptance rejection rate can reduce a lot of your anxiety with this. So once it's been accepted, or particularly if it's asked for revisions, you make the revisions based upon the reviewer's feedback, submit, resubmit. The same external reviewers who reviewed your paper originally then re-review, and then you have an acceptance, and you are then published. So moving on, looking more at the editorial process quickly, manuscript guidelines are essential. They're there for a reason. So this isn't just put something together, send it, and hope someone will say, okay, we like it enough, we'll fix it later. The purpose of the journal is really important to identify. What is its scope? Who is the audience? Are there specific elements it's looking for over something else? The type of submission. Different journals have different submission lengths. Some journals, for example, require you to have 4,000 words with abstract, body of the manuscript, and references. So be clear when you're putting together your review of your journals. If you're doing a systematic review and you have 97 references you're going to be discussing in your paper, it'll be difficult to do that in 4,000 words. You might want to find a different journal for that. You also want to look at the manuscript preparation guidelines. Do they require a reporting guideline? Is there a page format? Is there a spacing requirement? Are there language guidelines? Do they have some sort of inclusive language guidelines they would like to have used? Do they have specific formats for reporting of numbers, etc.? And the manuscript content. They may say, we want these sections and subsections. You can have up to 2 tables, 1 figure, AMA. So it's important to nail down the manuscript guidelines, which will change as you move across manuscripts. Also, you're looking at the kinds of questions external reviewers ask. The intent of the external reviewers' questions or comments is they are actively looking for flaws because they want the paper to be the best way it possibly can be written. And so they're going to be having very specific questions. They're going to say, I'm unclear about your research statement or your research question. You say this in the abstract, you say something a little bit different in the introduction, and then down in your discussion, you've introduced 2 other questions in here. they're going to probably critically read your method section. So why did you choose this kind of analysis? That's a sentence. If there's a theoretical construct that you're basing your entire process upon, name it and cite it. You want to make sure the analysis is appropriate for the study design and the results of the study are clearly presented. You can't assume the editors are going to know what you've done if you don't say it. And if there's not clearly and explicitly stated, you're going to get comments on it. Your discussion should be consistent with findings and the objective of the study. If you say this is what you're going to do, that's what you're talking about. Anything else is a whole nother paper. And make sure your references are up to date and relevant references are cited, because reviewers also look at the references and how you build your argument for the magnitude of the problem, the importance of studying this particular issue, what other findings have been to date, and how is your information that you're presenting in your manuscript going to build on the field. The editor, however, is going to be asking very different questions. Again, the purpose of the article should meet the scope within the journal. It should be appropriate for its audience. It should be as completely written as possible. No gaping holes, no nothing. He's going to look at flow. How well is it written? And how consistent it is. We talked about consistency, coherence further up. The story that you're telling of your research needs to be comprehensible. So it's not just putting words on paper. It's making that narrative work. It's linear. It's presented well. There's no missing steps, there's no gaps, and it all flows and reinforces the intent of the paper, which is to do X. Particularly, you should try to address how this manuscript is a contribution to the field, or it's a unique way of looking at previously published material. It is going to put a lot of emphasis on the reviewer comments. So when you're looking at the manuscript writing process, again, it is a major activity. So the best way to think about this is from a project management perspective. And your calendar is your friend. So break down the task into chunks so that you can actually work through it. And look at creating your outline based upon the manuscript requirements from the journal, the study design requirements for your particular type of study design, such as an RCT or a cohort study, etc. And schedule time for writing, whether you write 20 minutes a day or you do a 2-hour block a week, but schedule time for the writing. Set the goals and stick to them. Take advantage of the tools that we have available in the applications that we have. Setting up templates in Word for the style sheet, setting up the grammar and style checkers in the back end of Word, invaluable resource, and citation management programs, which can allow you to not only have your citations on hand in a designated space, but can also allow you to look at and refer back to the PDFs of the articles that you want to cite. Saves you a lot of time and effort. Build in on your to-do list that you have figures and tables that you need to create, because that again will take some time to make them essentially, in an absolute phrase, camera ready for production. A really good thing to do is consider using a buddy system when you write. If you're working in a group, then do group editing sessions where all of you come together, you read it aloud. And that really helps you hear how it sounds, because when you read, you tend to be elliptical. You skip or you assume. This really says, oh, we need a bridge sentence here, or this doesn't really make sense. And every time you hit a benchmark, I got my org ID done, break out the chocolate. And we strongly recommend you make use of your liaison librarian and build in time for the review process itself, where you're going to be able to set it aside, don't look at it for 3 or 4 days, come back, read it with essentially, hopefully, plain memory, and take the time to read it aloud. That's going to help you catch spelling issues, grammar issues. Suddenly you'll realize, oh, I should have cited so-and-so in my literature review, or that I'm not quite linear in the flow of my discussion. I need to move things around. So you're doing all these kinds of checks for presentation defects, because presentation defects are usually what often results in reviewer rejection right off the bat, if it's really egregious, or a lot of comments in the review saying all the things that you have to fix, which may seem somewhat daunting in that respect. So looking at structuring your manuscript, and this is an example, using the Journal of Behavioral Health Services and Research. This is the journal requirements. Title page, abstract, and implications of behavioral health section. They use a very specific citation style, which is a modified American Public Health Association citation style. Notes and a conflict of interest statement. The paper I'm submitting is a cohort study. So I'm going to go to the eCrater network and pull up the reporting guidelines for cohort studies. And in there are 22 items in these different sections that need to be reported. They have a specific way they'd like to have titles set up, abstract set up, etc. So then I'm going to combine those two things together so that in my working outline for my manuscript, I have my title page, I have my abstract, I have my introduction, I have my methods, I have my discussion, I have my implications for behavioral health, because that's a requirement of JBHSNR, my other information, notes as needed, conflict of interest statement, referencing what I need to have for JBHSNR, and then my specific references for JBHSNR that are specific to it alone. And it's a really nice way to say when I'm running my manuscript, I'm hitting on those comparable elements so that other people who have done cohort studies on my topic, my study can be compared to their study and possibly picked up for a practice guideline or a systematic review. It's transparent, and the reviewers will be very, very happy with that. So kind of looked at a number of things. So now we're looking at what we're going to do while we're writing. Use active voice. Passive voice is no longer considered standard or best practice. Use clear and simple sentences. As a reviewer, having to spend a lot of time disentangling what I think someone is saying or asking them to please explain this section is very annoying. A style checker in Word can eliminate cliches and jargon. Don't be overly complicated. If you're going to use a complicated word or phrase, define it for your reader, please. Again, because your reader may not be as expert in language of your particular area. Avoid prepositional and conjunctive trains. There's nothing more annoying than reading a sentence that is 10-line paragraph. Read the paper aloud, catch errors. I keep saying this, but it's very important because your brain hears differently than it reads, and hearing it read aloud makes it focus on something else because it's so dependent upon the voiced word that it will pick up those things that will be completely bypassed if you're trying to read it, unless you're a trained copy editor. Find a naive reader, someone who is not in your specialty area, to read your manuscript. If they say, I don't understand this, or I don't see the connection, or this doesn't flow into this, take the time to look at it again and see how you can make it more comprehensible to the reader, because that's going to be your introductory level reader in your journal, because not everyone's going to be as expert as you are in your area. If you're working with a group of authors, do group revisions. It's nice to work individually, but I can guarantee you, as a group author myself, a group session for reading and revision can be extremely productive. And always review the study design checklist, the reportable elements for that type of study design, to ensure that you're transparent in how you reported your study and how it was conducted. Build in to your calendar a 2-week roll-off period. Set it aside, don't look at it, don't touch it, don't do anything. And then set up time to review it and give yourself maybe a 3 to 4 day submission phase where you're reviewing the study design checklist to make sure those reportable elements are in them. You're reviewing the citations to ensure they are cited correctly. Read the paper out loud, use an IE video again, and rerun the grammar and spell check because you want to minimize any type of presentation defect. So our takeaways for this session are pretty simple. Take advantage of the tools we have to target and find peer-reviewed publications. Make sure the journal has a transparent publication process. You do not want to be at the mercy of a journal to which you've submitted your article. It has been accepted, and your article processing charges are not what you thought they were. And being hit with a $5,000 article processing charge to publish a manuscript is unnerving. And if it's non-US journal, you probably have no recourse through the courts. Make sure that the manuscript guidelines, you follow the directions, formatting, referencing style, they're there for a reason. Any questions you may have, send an email to the editor. They're there to answer questions. Make sure your grammar, your punctuation, and your flow are spot on. You really want to have a well-written and well-structured paper to submit. Take naive and expert readers and have them critically read the manuscript in the sections. If you're not a statistical expert, but someone in your group is, critically read and read it aloud more than once. Take advantage of group editing sessions. When you get your manuscript review back, pay attention to reviewer comments and suggestions. They are not personal. They don't know you. They are saying, this is a problem when I'm reading your manuscript. This is something that you need to correct. This is an issue. This needs a better explanation. I need a definition. I need citations. You're citing facts, but there's no citation to that fact. And more importantly, that your review of the literature addresses what's known in the field and what you are bringing to it. If you're rejected, cup of coffee, glass of wine, that's why you have 3 journals to identify. Journal 1 said no. Journal 2 could say yes. Journal 3 could say yes. If they all say no, take a look at what the reviewers have said. And there's a commonality across the reviews. If I get the same kind of critical reviews from Journal 1 when I read my manuscript from Journal 2, it makes me realize I didn't pay attention to what the reviewers told me for Journal 1. And make use of your liaison librarian to learn about the tools, etc., that we have available. We're happy to help you with that. So coming to the end of the presentation, we are here to help you walk smarter. We're here to answer questions you may have, and we have other classes on writing and getting published. So please look at our YouTube channel, find out more on our website, and we wish you great success in getting published.